Hi, friends. Pastor Terry here. We are Dalhousie Church, and this is the 10-Minute Coach. I'm going to continue creating the 10 Minutes Coach for through the Sundays of Advent. I realize that many of you, if you're doing this as part of your life group, will be taking a break or maybe doing Christmas parties or things like that. But there's a bit of an obsessive compulsive part of me that just can't leave something unfinished. So I will finish that. But I also know that some of you will watch these videos in advance of a Sunday service and allow them to maybe add to your experience of the Sunday worship, which is fantastic. Some of you may come back to these afterwards. Maybe you'll have a bit of time through the Christmas holidays to think and reflect and pray, and perhaps some of this will be helpful to you, or you're together with your family. And maybe there's one or two of these questions that are on the back of the sermon notes that would just prompt a very interesting and inspiring conversation for you as a family. Because the point of this, of course, is that we are attempting to anticipate the coming of Christ, anticipate the celebration of Christmas by going back through the Old Testament prophets and looking at kind of the desperate circumstances that they found themselves in as they attempted to call the people back to obedience to God, back to submission to God, and to waylay the judgment that God promised to bring to those who would be irresponsible to the covenant that God had made. Now that kind of takes us into the account in a fascinating way. I did not have time in the Sunday message to reference the two historical places where the prophet Jeremiah's story and this period of history is covered in Second Chronicles, and I've given you the reference there. Second Chronicles chapter 35 and 36 has a two-chapter summary. Second Kings also has a two-chapter, well, it's more than two chapters, from chapter 23 through 22 through chapter 25 of Second Kings. You've got another telling of this period of history from the installation of Josiah as king through to the fall of Jerusalem, or through the fall of Jerusalem, through some of what took place after that. And then Chronicles ends with the announcement of Cyrus, and that the people would go back. He would invite people to go back to Jerusalem in order to rebuild the temple there. We'll talk about that a couple of Sundays from now when we get to the prophet Daniel. Cyrus is king of the Medes and Persians. You say, hey, Terry, I haven't heard reference to the Medes and Persians. What's about that? They're the kingdom that comes after the Babylonians, and they conquer so the Babylonians conquered the Assyrians, and then the Medes and Persians conquered the Babylonians, and it's Cyrus of the Medes and Persians who actually issues the edict that the temple in Jerusalem is to be rebuilt. That edict comes 70 years after the exile, exactly as Jeremiah had prophesied. And it's one of the things that's quite exciting as you read the prophet Daniel. He says, I was reading in the prophet Jeremiah. It was 70 years, so I went to prayer for the people. I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe something that's inspiring for you. These pieces fit together in really very, very exciting ways. As you reflect in personally or as a family or with your life group, I think it's worth going into this sort of introspection around the subject of idolatry. And we haven't had an opportunity to really talk about that through the prophets. All of the prophets are concerned about idolatry, and they hearken back to the warnings that were present in the Mosaic Law, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and specifically Leviticus, which spells out do's and don'ts, and maybe even more specifically, this is related to the three sermons that Moses preached on the plains of Moab before the children of Israel went into the land. So this was the second generation. The first generation died in the wilderness. Second generation going into the land. Moses is not going to be joining them. Leading the people would be Joshua and Caleb across into the land. Those three sermons are preserved for us in what we refer to as the book of Deuteronomy. And there are many scholars who think that's what Josiah's scholars found dust dust covered in the archives of the temple, which which then furthered reforms. Josiah had started reforms. King Josiah of Judah in Jerusalem had begun reforms, calling the people back to the worship of Yahweh, tearing down the idol worship, the idols that were on the high places around Judah. All of this pleased the Lord. Josiah was only 8 years old when he started. Clearly, he was being guided by the priest and the prophet that were with him. They were coaching him, but he was being responsive. And as he becomes a young man, he takes further responsibility for that. Lo and behold, it just tells us the book of the law was discovered in the temple. Many scholars think it was specifically Deuteronomy. They think that because of the way the historical narrative kind of all unfolds and the kind of language that is used to bring correction as the first people of God are then looking back, saying, what happened? How is it that we ended up in exile in Babylon after all the promises God had made? And sure enough, as you gather together 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, as we put together the book of Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, there's this narrative that unfolds that the very things that God warned about in Deuteronomy, Moses warned about in his sermons in Deuteronomy, if you do this, God will be faithful. If you don't do that, God's going to bring judgment. Well, lo and behold, all of that has unfolded, and Jeremiah is referencing that. The chronicler, probably writing from exile, outlines all of this and takes us to this very exciting pronouncement that Cyrus of the Medes and Persians is going to fund the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. It points to a faithfulness of God. I gave you some passages of Scripture which show his heart's cry. God portrays himself as a jilted lover, that he is a husband whose wife has been unfaithful, who is persevering with his people, calling them back, but inviting consequences that are necessary. They're portrayed as children who need to be disciplined. These are mere metaphors, right? But it's the heart of God that is being displayed for us. And he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. His heart is for you. His longing is that we would walk in submission to him. What do we do when the scriptures don't quite make sense? Or when they cut across the grain of popular morality? How are we going to live? Do we allow the church to be modified by social norms? Or do we live out of a conviction that no, there is a morality that is required to live rightly before our God? It is actually what is wholesome and right and true and will result in life. Jesus said, if you love me, you'll obey me. We have these kinds of quotes in the pages of the New Testament, the Gospels. And he described himself as the good shepherd who lays down his life. He describes himself as the one who gives life itself. And it's this that we're looking forward to in these this encouragement. He says, I have come that you may have life. John 10, starting at verse 9. I've come that you may have life. Jeremiah has been saying, look, live, obey and live, submit and live. This is about life. Jesus describes it as abundant life. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. I'm the good shepherd. I'm attempting to shepherd you forward. And so we're reflecting on these pages of Scripture. We're wanting to understand the heart of God. We're wanting to be honest about the tendencies toward idolatry that exist within our society, certainly, but even within ourselves. Those places that we would go when we are depressed, when we're discouraged, when difficulties in life come, real things, real griefs. Lord, where are you in the midst of this? Well, do I just turn to alcohol or turn to substance or turn to hiding in the gaming room or throwing myself into hobbies that are really intended to kind of I love that Timothy Keller quote: when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing, it is an idol. All kinds of good things, enjoy them, but don't allow them to be an ultimate thing. Only God can be that ultimate thing in our lives. We look to Him as the one who satiates our pain, who explains our brokenness, to whom we look with trust when the world is not making sense, when our life is not making sense, when the pain and difficulty of our existence seems too much. We turn to Him. We turn to Him and we say, it's you alone that have the words of life. It's you alone that I want to follow in the midst of the pain that is here. It was true for the first people of God. Jeremiah has been writing his writings collected for their encouragement. I believe it's part of a collective history that was written for their encouragement. How now shall we live? Will we be those who walk in obedience and in submission to God, inviting Him to be the one in whom our confidence and our trust rests? I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Dalhousie Church. This has been the 10-11 Minute Coach. Bless you. Merry Christmas. Hopefully we get a chance to be together multiple times through this season. Bye for now.